Okay. We chillin'. I just got my stuff posted. Have King in Yellow open. We're straight pogging. Hello. I don't know what the deal with the chat is. The chat's still not working, but hi. Whether you're here as a VOD watcher or whether you're here actually in the chat, that don't matter because this is a member stream that will, right after it's done, be made public. So I am going to hop in and just start reading Story 2 in The King in Yellow, The Mask. Now, last time on The King in Yellow, we read The Repairer of Reputations, which was about a dude who thought that he was the prince of Carcosa. And so he attempted to kill his cousin because he was going to marry the princess of Carcosa, or just some random woman that was like important to Carcosa in the story of Carcosa. So anyway, we had this descent into madness where we followed a crazy character, a character decoupled from reality, who thought he was entitled to the crown of Carcosa. And eventually he ended up dying in an insane asylum. The Repairer of Reputations who he worked with, which I still don't understand how the guy was the Repairer of Reputations. I don't understand what reputations he repaired. He was getting like $500, which at the time was like $20,000 for his repairing. That was never explained to me, but apparently he was well connected with a bunch of different people. Now, we're going to read The Mask, which I'm just thinking Jim Carrey. However, The Mask. You, sir, should unmask. Indeed? Indeed, it is time. We've all laid aside disguise, but you. I wear no mask. No mask? No mask? Okay, so what was... With the Repair of Reputations, the little snippet at the beginning from Carcosa was the song, Casilda's song in The King in Yellow about Carcosa, where the whole Repair of Reputations dealt with the idea of, like, the ruler of Carcosa being entranced by Carcosa. With this I think is an indication, it's setting up, it is setting the tone of, I guess, like, identity and being a monster. I don't know. So I'm starting up The Mask, Story 2 of The King in Yellow, and I guess this is where we hop in. Although I knew nothing of chemistry, I listened fascinated. This is me talking to Vivi. I'm sorry. I've recently been chatting with Doc Vivi Leandra over on Twitch, and she is like a real life scientist. So she'll just like explain to me how a rail cannon would not function in real life and how a coil cannon would be, like a coil gun would be way better. And I'm just like, Or this is me with like Rory telling me about like geology and archaeology. I'm just like, It's so cool having people who are smarter than me that I know. Identity? Arrow's identity is a form of monster. I'm not a monster girl. I'm a monster, but I'm not a girl. I'm non-binary, so I'm a monster NB, if anything. Although I knew nothing of chemistry, I listened fascinated. He picked up an Easter lily, which Genevieve? That's not... Let me check. Was it Genevieve was the woman? No. Was she like Guinevere? Constance was her name. Got it. I don't know. I was like, is that the same lady from the last one? Because I know these are all I think these are all disconnected from one another, but follow the same core theme of The King in Yellow. He picked up an Easter lily, which Genevieve had brought that morning from Notre Dame, and dropped into the basin. Instantly, the liquid lost its crystalline clearness. For a second, the lily was enveloped in a milk-white foam, which disappeared, leaving the fluid opalescent. Changing tints of orange and crimson played over the surface, and then what seemed to be a ray of pure sunlight struck through the bottom where the lily was resting. At the same instant, he plunged his hand into the basin and drew out the flower. There is no danger, he explained, if you choose the right moment. The golden ray is the signal. Also, not the basin discussion. We're back on this. He held the lily towards me, and I took it in my hand. It had turned to stone, to the purest marble. You see, he said, it is without flaw. What sculptor can reproduce it? The marble was white as snow, but in its depths the veins of the lily were tinged with the palest azure, and a faint flush lingered deep in its heart. Don't ask me the reason for that, he smiled, noticing my wonder. I have no idea why the veins and hearts are tinted, but they always are. Yesterday I tried one of Genevieve's goldfish. There it is. The fish looked as if sculpted in marble, but if you held it in the light, the stone was beautifully veined with a faint blue, and from somewhere within came a rosy light, like the tint which slumbers in an opal. I looked into the basin. Once more it seemed filled with clear as crystal. If I should touch it now? I demanded. I don't know, he replied, but you had better not try. There is one thing I'm curious about, I said, and that is where the ray of sunlight comes from. It looked like a sunbeam enough. It looked like a sunbeam, true enough, he said. I don't know. It always comes when I immerse any living thing. Perhaps, he continued smiling, perhaps it is the vital spark of the creature escaping to the source from which it came from. Which, like, I thought that too. I thought, like, is this the life force? Is this the soul of the being exiting its mortal coil? Why are you smiling? Why are you happy about this? You are potentially ripping souls from their mortal forms in order to crystallize and ossify. To ossify living creatures. And you're smiling at the idea of ripping their souls out of their body. I say Basin like British people talk about dudes named Basil. Well, okay, so I say Basin, I say Bazin, I say Basil, I say Basil. Like, I'm all over the place. I'm international. I saw he was mocking and threatened him with a maul stick, but he only laughed and changed the subject. Stay to lunch. Genevieve will be here directly. Will be here directly? I saw her going to early mass, I said, and she looked as fresh and sweet as that lily. Before you destroyed it. Do you think I destroyed it? Said Boris gravely. Destroyed? Preserve? How can we tell? We sat in the corner of a studio near his unfinished group of the Fates. Okay, so this is the second time the Fates have come up in this series. I imagine that it's going to be a recurring sub-theme of the idea of fate, of destiny, of inescapable larger powers beyond yourself. Because in the first one, there was the self-termination chamber that had the Fates on it. In this one, there's the Fates in a sculptor's statue. And there's obviously something supernatural going on here, where I do like the fact that at least we're 2 for 2 right now of entering a story where the weird stuff has already happened and we're jumping in like a third or halfway through the weird stuff happening. We've already discovered this strange new ossification that leaves azure veins and hearts within the living things that it has ossified, that the sunbeams emerge from. So we're not quite going in at the very beginning. We're going in after it's already started, which, funny enough, is something that Lovecraft also did, because Spike Chambers is not by Lovecraft. This was actually a contemporary of his, and may have inspired the Call of Cthulhu, given this was released in 1895. But I do find it interesting that is like 2 for 2 with both the Fates and for just jumping right into it. Truly, we have tampered with culinary powers, but not tampered. Oh my gosh. We should not tamper with such culinary powers. Also, I want to check. Like, is the text on screen legible? Because if we want, I could swap over to this one, where it should be easier to read, but also I don't have the book in front of me. And I could put the book in front of me, but I think I'll leave it like this, because this is like easier for you to read, I assume, because it's larger. I don't know why the text isn't I don't know why the chat isn't working, but I think members stream mess with that. Both are too small for your old man eyes. Well, I'm sorry. Get better eyes. Steal them from a 16-year-old back when your eyesight is at its peak. He leaned back on the sofa, twirled a sculptor's chisel, and squinting at his work. By the way, he said, I've finished painting up that old academic Ariadne, and I suppose I will have to go to the salon. It's all I have ready this year, but after the success of the Madonna brought me, I feel ashamed to send a thing like that. The Madonna, an exquisite marble for which Genevieve had sat, had been the sensation of last year's salon. I looked at the area. Sorry. Calling it the Madonna when I think of Madonna as the singer, and secondarily to the singer, I think of Madonna as just a term you call someone, not as a mythological figure, makes it so that saying the Madonna really trips me up. Same thing with Ariadne. Saying the Ariadne really just trips me up. I looked at the Ariadne. It was a magnificent piece of technical work, but I agreed with Boris that the world would expect something better of him than that. Still, it was impossible now to think of finishing it in time for the salon, that splendid, terrible group, half-shrouded in the marble behind me. The fates would have to wait. Okay, first off, that's a really clever line, because obviously the fates, the statue, the actual stonework have to wait, but the idea of like fate having to wait, I like that line. That being said, something tells me that this sculptor who wants to get even higher, even better than he did last year, is going to take people and put the people in the substance. And it's only going to be recognized at the salon when the main character, when the point of view character goes there and sees that they have all of these like blue veins throughout them. And that's probably why it's called the mask, is because the mask is probably related to the fact that it's going to look like people are wearing masks once they're ossified. The substance. I don't know what to call it. The Madonna juice? I don't think that's the proper way to call it. We were proud of Boris Yvain. Boris Yvain. We claimed him, and he claimed us, on the strength of his having been born in America, although his father was French and his mother was a Russian. Everyone in Beaux Arts called him Boris, and yet there were only two of us whom addressed him in that same familiar way, Jack Scott and myself. Perhaps my being in love with Genevieve had something to do with his affection for me. Not that it had ever been acknowledged between us, but after all was settled and she had told me with tears in her eyes that it was Boris whom she loved, I went over to his house and congratulated him. The perfect cordiality of that interview did not deceive either of us, I always believed, although to one at least it was a great comfort. I do not think he and Genevieve ever spoke of the matter together, but Boris knew. So someone mentioned in my comments that The King in Yellow, obviously Chambers, the author, is a romance author first and foremost. He mostly wrote contemporary romance at the time and then shifted, and then like this was his one weird thing, which just so happens whenever you're creative, that's always going to happen to you. The thing you're passionate about, the thing that you love doing, is never the thing that gets popular. That's just how it goes. So he's a romance author, and I was informed that the later stories kind of shift more romance, but someone pointed out that actually every single story has something to do with romance. In the first one, it was Constance and the cousin. In this one, it is Genevieve and main character. So it is interesting that, I mean, obviously romance is a intergenerational, inter-era concept. That does not surprise me that it would feature heavily in something from 1895, right? But it is funny that, yes, the romance author who wrote weird, otherworldly fiction did in fact include a bunch of romance. The protagonist is always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Ugh, sadness. Genevieve was lovely. The Madonna-like purity of her face may have inspired by the Sanctus in Gounod's Mass. I'm unfamiliar, I'm uncultured, but I was always glad when she was changed the mood for what we called her April maneuvers. She was as variable as an April day. In the morning grave, dignified and sweet. At noon, laughing, capricious. At evening, whatever one least expected. I preferred her so rather than in that Madonna-like tranquility which stirred the depths of my heart. I was dreaming of Genevieve when he spoke again. What do you think of my discovery, Alec? I think it wonderful. I shall make no use of it, beyond satisfying my own curiosity, so far as may be, and the secret will die with me. It would be rather a blow to sculpture, would it not? We painters lose more than we ever gain by photography. Okay, so he's a painter talking with a sculptor. Got it. So Alec is a painter talking with Boris, who is in Beaux Arts, a sculptor, and we're getting the relationship map. This is actually like good. This is good dialogue. This is good presentation. I'm actually really enjoying The King in Yellow thus far, despite the fact that there is some weirdness, like how freaking I demanded to put my hand in. It's good. Boris nodded, playfully playing with the edge of the chisel. This new vicious discovery would corrupt the world of art. No, I shall never confide the secret to anyone, he said slowly. It would be hard to find anyone less informed about such phenomena than myself, but of course, I had heard of mineral springs so saturated with silica that the leaves and twigs which fell into them were turned to stone after a time. I dimly comprehended the process, how the silica replaced the vegetable matter atom by atom, and the result was a duplicate of the object in stone. This, I confess, had never interested me greatly, and as for the fossils thus produced, they disgusted me. Boris, it appeared, feeling curiosity instead of repugnance, had investigated the subject and accidentally stumbled on a solution which, attacking the immersed object with a ferocity unheard of, in a second did the work of years. This was all I could make out of the strange story he had just been telling me. He spoke again after a long silence. I am almost frightened when I think of what I've found. Scientists will go mad over the discovery. It was too simple. It discovered itself. When I think of that formula and that new element precipitated in metallic scales... What new element? Oh, I haven't thought of naming it, and I don't believe I ever shall. There are enough precious metals now in the world to cut throats over. I pricked up my ears. Have you struck gold, Boris? No, better. But see here, Alec. He laughed, starting up. You and I have all we need in this world. Ah, how sinister and covetous you look already. I laughed too and told him I was devoured by the desire for gold, and we had better talk of something else. So when Genevieve came in shortly after, we had turned our backs on alchemy. Genevieve was dressed in a silvery gray from head to foot. The light glinted. Is Genevieve gonna get stoned? Is this gonna be like OG fridging? Because if Genevieve is like beautiful and fantastic and amazing and wonderful, and like Boris is like, oh, only the most beautiful, fantastic, amazing, wonderful sculpture would win me the salon. What if he just like dunks her and is just like, hey, I'm putting you in the jar. Do we need to break out the corkboard and colored twine? I don't think we do. However, what I'm liking is that Chambers recognizes the value in subtlety and subtext. And I don't know if this is a generational thing. I don't know if this is a product of its time thing. I don't know if it's just he's a fine author. But consistently throughout The King in Yellow, he has decided and opted to not say things explicitly that then in dialogue from other characters, from other points of view, change things about the world. Similarly, so for instance, when in the Repair of Reputations, the main character is opening his safe, and he describes how he has to input the multiple combination tumbler, and then he has to wait for the time-sensitive lock to open it, and then he can examine the crown, but then only for a few moments, and then the safe needs to close once more, so he has to put it back. And then in one comment, his cousin just says like, what's that like brass loop you have in that shoebox? And then it's made very clear from a dialogue, from another character's perspective, oh, our main character is not viewing the world in reality. Our main character is not reliable. Similarly here, a very natural thing is to say like, oh, your solution is going to change the world of sculptures. Like, as a painter, I already lost that with photography. Suddenly, we know you're a painter. And we understand that that is who you are. Like, that adds more context because we already talked about how Boris was a part of Beaux Arts. Presumably, Jack and Alec are both members of Beaux Arts. Presumably, like, maybe even both painters working alongside Boris in a, like, trade capacity, but not in a actual physical capacity. We learn about them without actually having to be told, yes, I, Alec, as a painter, am a member of Beaux Arts. Although others will be nasty to Boris about his Russian heritage, I and my friend Jack, like it's a bit more subtle than that, which I appreciate, particularly given how I think in the modern prose. There's a lot of explain it to the reader. And I think that it is a sign of poor writing, or I wouldn't even say poor writing. I would say it's a sign that you lack confidence in your writing if you explicitly state stuff like that, because you should be able to trust that your reader will pick up on that. And I also think it is a generational thing. I think it is also an era of writing thing. I think people nowadays want it to be explained in the most direct way possible. At least the standard audience wants that, which is why it's so prevalent. And I think that there's significant value to not saying the quiet part out loud, depending on what the quiet part is. So back to this. Genevieve was dressed in silvery gray from head to foot. The light glinted along the soft curves of her face, of her fair hair, as she turned her cheek to Boris. Then she saw me and returned my greeting. She had never before failed to blow me a kiss from the tips of her white fingers, and I promptly complained of the omission. She smiled and held out her hand, which dropped almost before it had touched mine. Then she said, looking to Boris, "You must ask Alec to stay for luncheon." This was also something new. She'd always asked me herself until today. "I did," said Boris shortly. "And you said yes, I hope." She turned to me with a charming conventional smile. I might have been an acquaintance of the day before yesterday. I made her a low bow. "Ça va bien, l'honneur, madame." So, I mean, it would be my honor, ma'am. Because Java is, I would have, or it would be my... This has to be that, right? I had the honor. Yeah. Because I don't speak French. So I don't know this. However, I speak a little bit of French. I studied French a little bit. Roar speak. Yes, I made the Napoleon video setting this up. I knew this was going to happen. Because bien is good. L'honneur, honor, madame, and Java is I have. So it's like I have a good honor. Which I don't know why it wouldn't just be... I don't know why bien is necessary. Weird. But refusing to take up our usual bantering tone, she murmured a hospitable commonplace and disappeared. Boris and I looked at one another. "I'd better go home, don't you think?" I asked. "Hanged if I know," he replied frankly. While we were discussing the advisability of my departure, Genevieve reappeared in the doorway without her bonnet. She was wonderfully beautiful, but her color was too deep, and her lovely eyes were too bright. She came straight up to me and took my arm. "Luncheon is ready. Was I cross, Alec? I thought I had a headache, but I haven't. Come here, Boris." And she slipped her other arm through his. "Alec knows that after you, there's no one in the world who I like as well as I like him. So if he feels snubbed, it wouldn't hurt. So if he sometimes feels snubbed, it won't hurt him." Why am I French? I thought that Boris was the French one. Why am I the French one? "Ah, la bonne heure," I cried. "Who says there are no thunderstorms in April?" "Are you ready?" chanted Boris. "Aye, ready!" And arm in arm, we raced into the dining room, scandalizing the servants. After all, we were not so much to blame. Genevieve was 18, Boris was 23, and I not quite 21. Okay, so... I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of funny. Like, I'm getting sitcom vibes, because my understanding is that, like, Genevieve had a would they, won't they, had a courting period with both Boris and Alec, and then chose Boris. And Alec is sad about this, but kind of like buried the hatchet with Boris. They're not at each other's throats. They're still friends. But Alec and Genevieve are still trying to navigate this kind of, what is our relationship now that we're no longer in the courting period? A polycule would have been the answer. Exactly, Sam. Like 18, 23, 21, they're all young enough. It might be 1895, but they can just have a throuple. Like, we know that Boris and Alec clearly have chemistry, because Boris was just talking chemistry with Alec all of the start of this chapter. Although I am worried that I think it's not going to be Boris. My guess, based off the repair of reputations and the vibes I'm getting from this one, is that it's going to be... Alec is the one that puts Genevieve in the solution. Polycool out of nowhere with a steel chair. Like, I think Alec is going to put Genevieve in the solution because he's like, oh, I want her to stay beautiful like this forever, right? And then I don't know if that's going to be sent to the salon or not. That might be submitted to the salon and then like Boris will recognize it. But I do think that Genevieve is definitely going to get solutioned. And I don't know if the theme of The King in Yellow is that all of the main characters are the baddies. I don't know if that's going to be the case, so I'm excited to see. Some work that I was doing about this time on the decorations for Genevieve's boudoir kept me constant at the quaint little hotel in the Rue Saint-Cécile. Boris and I in those days labored hard, but as we pleased, which we fitfully, and we all three with Jack Scott, idled a great deal together. One quiet afternoon, I had been wandering over the house, examining curios, prying into odd corners, bringing out sweetmeats and cigars from strange hiding places. And at last I stopped in the bathing room. Boris, all over clay, stood there washing his hands. Is Boris naked? Is this like the start of the polykill? Is this a Alec-Boris romance? Is this young man Yowie? I was gonna say old man Yowie, but like no, they're like 23 and 21. That's young. The room was built of rose-colored marble, except the floor, which was tessellated in rose and gray. In the center was a square pool sunken below the surface of the floor. Steps led down into it, sculpted pillars supporting a frescoed ceiling. A delicious marble Cupid appeared to have just alighted on his pedestal at the upper end of the room. The whole interior was Boris's work and mine. Boris, in his working clothes of white canvas, scraped the traces of clay and red modeling wax from his handsome hands, and coquetted over his shoulder with a Cupid. I see you, he insisted. Don't try to look the other way and pretend not to see me. You know who made you, little humbug. I swear I'm not a Fujoshi. But it was always my role to interpret Cupid's sentiments in these conversations. And when my turn came, I responded in such a manner that Boris seized my arm and dragged me away towards the pool, declaring he would duck me. Sorry. We have a rhythm where he talks. So I look at his. We have a rhythm where I look at his handsome hands, and then he has banter with Cupid, and then I respond as Cupid, and then he grabs me and pins me down in the pool. And you're telling me this was straight? I'm not even gonna say that it's just, I'm supporting the Mask King in Yellow polycule. I think it's a throuple. No, like, Sam, you're so right. Next instant, he dropped my arm and turned pale. Good God, he said. I forgot the pool was full of the solution. I shivered a little, and I dryly advised him to remember better where he'd stored the precious liquid. I know where you can store your precious liquid. In heaven's name, why do you keep a small lake of the gruesome stuff here of all places, I asked. I want to experiment on something large. On me, for instance. $1895 was a different time. Oh, that came too close for jesting, but I do want to watch the action of the solution on a more highly organized living body. There's that big white rabbit, he said, following me into the studio. Jack Scott, wearing a paint-stained jacket, came wandering in, appropriated all the oriental sweetmeats he lay his hands on, looted the cigarette case, and finally, he and Boris disappeared together to visit the Luxembourg Gallery, where a new silvery bronze by Rodin and a landscape by Monet were claiming the exclusive attention of artistic France. I went back to the studio and resumed my work. It was a Renaissance scene which Boris wanted me to paint for Genevieve's boudoir, but the small boy, who was unwillingly dawdling through a series of poses for it, today refused all bribes to be good. He never rested an instant in the same position, and inside of 5 minutes, I had as many different outlines of the little beggar. Are you posing, or are you executing a song and dance, my friend? I inquired. Whichever monsieur pleases, he replied with an angelic smile. Why is this actually so good? Like, outside of the yaoi, outside of the polycule, outside of the silliness that I'm ascribing to it, unironically, like, the banter has been pretty solid. The first one very much felt like an 1895 story that I could appreciate the meta level contradiction of reality versus the main character's perspective. But this one, I'm just genuinely like, I'm enjoying myself. I'm enjoying it. If you told me this was written like 30 years ago, I'd believe you. Of course, I dismiss him for the day, and of course, I paid him for the full time. That being the way we spoil our models. Like, after the young imp had gone, I made a few perfunctory daubs at my work, but was so thoroughly out of humor that it took me the rest of the afternoon to undo the damage I had done. So at last, I scraped my palette, stuck my brushes in a bowl of black soap, and strolled into the smoking room. I really believe that, excepting Genevieve's apartments, no room in the house was so free from the perfume of tobacco as this one. It was a queer... It certainly was queer. It was a queer chaos of ends and... It was a queer chaos of odds and ends hung within threadbare tapestry. A sweet-toned old spinet in good repair stood by the window. There were stands of weapons, some old and dull, others bright and modern, festoons of Indian and Turkish armor over the mantel, 2 or 3 good pictures, and a pipe rack. It was here that we used to come for new sensations in smoking. I doubt if any type of pipe existed which had not represented in that rack. When we selected one, we immediately carried it somewhere else and smoked it, for the place was, on the whole, more gloomy and less inviting than any in the house. But this afternoon, the twilight was very soothing. The rugs and skins on the floor looked brown and soft and drowsy. The big couch was piled with cushions. I found my pipe and curled up there for an unaccustomed smoke in the smoking room. I had chosen one with a long, flexible stem, and lighting it fell to dreaming. After a while it went out, but I did not stir. I dreamed on and presently fell asleep. Okay, so this is definitely weed, right? This is not tobacco. This is, hey, let's smoke weed in our pipes. This room isn't entertaining enough. Let's go over to the one that we just spent all day painting in, lie down on the ground and get high as we're surrounded by drying pictures and paintings, right? Like, this is just a stoner artistic polycule of starving artists. Opium? Oh, wait, no, you're actually so right. Like, I think unironically, it might actually just be opium. I was joking. I awoke to the saddest music I had ever heard. The room was quite dark. I had no idea what time it was. A ray of moonlight slivered in one edge of the old spinet, and the polished wood seemed to exhale the sounds as perfume floats above a box of sandalwood. Someone rose in the darkness and came away weeping quietly, and I was fool enough to cry out, "Genevieve!" She dropped at my voice, and I had time to curse myself, while I made a light and tried to raise her from the floor. She shrank away with a murmur of pain. She was very quiet, and I asked for Boris. I carried her to the divan, to the divan, and went to look for him, but he was not in the house. And the servants were gone to bed. Perplexed and anxious, I hurried back to Genevieve. She lay where I had left her, looking very white. "I cannot find Boris or any of the servants." "I know," she answered faintly. "Boris has gone to Ept with Mr. Scott. I did not remember when I sent you for him just now." But he can't get back in that case before tomorrow afternoon. And are you hurt? Did I frighten you into falling? Oh, what an awful fool I am. But I was only half awake. Boris thought you had gone home before dinner. Do please excuse us for letting you stay here all this time." "I have had a long nap," I laughed. So sound that I did not know whether I was still asleep or not, had found myself staring at the figure that was moving towards me and called out your name. "Have you been trying the old spinet? You must have played very softly." I would tell 1,000 more lies worse than that one to see the look of relief that came into her face. She smiled adorably and said in her natural voice, "Alec, I tripped on the wolf's head and think my ankle is sprained. Please call Mary and then go home." I did as she bade me and left her there when the maid came in. At noon next day when I called, I found Boris walking restlessly about his studio. "Genevieve is asleep just now," he told me. "The sprain is nothing, but why should she have such a high fever? The doctor can't account for it. Or else he will not," he muttered. "Genevieve has a fever?" "I should say so, and has actually been a little lightheaded at intervals all night. The idea, gay little Genevieve. I think we're past a throuple. I think maybe Mary. I think that, like, maybe this is a polycule, or maybe this is just like a lavender wedding situation. Maybe it's just Boris and Alec, and then there's like a maid-master dynamic going on between Genevieve and Marie. I have no evidence for that one, but gay little Genevieve, as soon as she got hurt, she wanted one particular person to come take care of her. And if that is not the most sapphic thing I've ever heard. I should say so, and has actually been a little lightheaded at intervals all night. The idea, gay little Genevieve, without a care in the world, and she keeps saying her heart's broken and she wants to die. I guess Mary didn't reciprocate her feeling. My own heart stood still. Boris leaned against the door of his studio, looking down, his hands in his pockets, his kind, keen eyes clouded, a new line of trouble drawn over the mouth's good mark that made the smile. The maid has orders to summon him the instant Genevieve opens her eyes. We waited, and Boris, growing restless, wandered about, fussing with modeling wax and red clay. Suddenly, he started for the next room. "Come and see my rose-colored bath full of death," he cried. "Is it death?" I asked to humor his mood. "You were not prepared to call it life, I suppose," he answered. As he spoke, he plucked a solitary goldfish squirming and twisting out of his globe. "We'll send this one after the other, wherever that is," he said. There was a feverish excitement in his voice. A dull weight of fever lay on my limbs and on my brain as I followed him to the fair crystal pool with its pink-tinted sides, and he dropped the creature in. Falling, its scales flashed with a height orange gleam in its angry twistings and contortions. The moment it struck the liquid, it became rigid and sank heavily to the bottom. Then came the milky foam, the splendid hues radiating on the surface, and then the shaft of pure, serene light broke through from seemingly infinite depths. Boris plunged in his hand and drew out an exquisite marble thing, blue-veined, rose-tinted, and glistening with opalescent drops. "Child's play," he muttered, and looked wearily, longingly at me. I don't need to repeat myself. I've said this enough. "Child's play," he muttered, and looked wearily, longingly at me, as if I could answer such questions. But Jack Scott came in and entered into that game, as he called it, with ardor. Nothing would do but to try to experiment on the white rabbit there and then. I was willing that Boris should find distraction from his cares, but I hated to see the life go out of a warm, living creature, and I declined to be present. Picking up a book at random, I sat down in the studio to read. Alas, I had found The King in Yellow. After a few moments, which seemed ages, I was putting it away with a nervous shudder when Boris and Jack came in, bringing their marble rabbit. At the same time, the bell rang above and a cry came from the sick room. Boris was gone like a flash, and the next moment, he called, "Jack! Run for the doctor! Bring him with you! Alec, come here!" I stayed and stood at the door. A frightened maid came out in haste and ran away to fetch some remedy. Genevieve, sitting bolt upright, with crimson cheeks and glittering eyes, babbled incessantly and resisted Boris's gentle restraint. He called me to help. At my first touch, she sighed and sank back, closing her eyes, and then, as we still bent above her, she opened them again, looked straight into Boris's face, poor fever-crazed girl, and told her secret. At the same instant, our three lives turned into a new channel. The bond that had held us together so long snapped forever, and a new bond was forged in its place, for she had spoken my name, and as the fever tortured her, her heart poured out its load of hidden sorrow. New social link started, like the persona polycule. It's begun. Amazed and dumb, I bowed my head while my face burned like a live coal, and the blood sugared in my ears, stupefying me with its clamor. Incapable of movement, incapable of speech, I listened to her feverish words in an agony of shame and sorrow. I could not silence her. I could not look at Boris. Then I felt an arm upon my shoulder, and Boris turned a bloodless face to mine. "It is not your fault, Alec. Don't grieve so if she loves you." But he could not finish, and as the doctor stepped swiftly into the room saying, "Ah, the fever!" I seized Jack Scott and hurried him into the street saying, "Boris would rather be alone." We crossed the street to our own apartments, and that night, seeing I was going to be ill too, he went for the doctor again. The last thing I recollect with any distinctness was hearing Jack say, "For heaven's sake, doctor, what ails him to wear a face like that?" And I thought of The King in Yellow and the pallid mask. I was very ill for the strain of 2 years which I had endured since a fatal May when I was very ill for the strain of 2 years, which I had endured since the fatal May morning when Genevieve murmured, "I love you, but I think I love Boris best," told me on that. Okay. I thought I was confused for a second. You felt ill for the past 2 years when Genevieve chose Boris over you, right? Right, because heart broke, naturally. But then now we're 2 years later. Understood. Love sickness. I thought this was saying there's a 2-year time skip, and I was going to be like, oh no. You know, I love living in an area that has a bunch of people, has a bunch of cars, has a bunch of activity to it. I don't love living right next to someone who has, I think, several people who have motorcycles and at different times of day will just like zoom. I have one that does it at midnight every night. I have one that does it at noon, like every day. I have one that like 5 to 6 p.m. they usually like get home. So I have no idea what the deal is. But for whatever reason, every single day, at least 2 or 3 times a day, right outside my window, which because I don't have AC in this house, I have to leave my windows open basically all the time. There's just... It's so silly. I was very ill for the strain of 2 years, which I'd endured since that fateful morning when Genevieve murmured, "I love you, but I think I love Boris best," told on me at last. I'd never imagined that it could become more than I could endure. Outwardly tranquil, I had deceived myself. Although the inward battle raged night after night, and I, lying alone in my room, cursed myself for rebellious thoughts unloyal to Boris and unworthy of Genevieve, the morning always brought relief, and I returned to Genevieve and my dear Boris with a heart washed clean of the tempests of the night. Never in word or deed or thought while with them had I betrayed my sorrow, even to myself. Which, like... I'm eating popcorn right now. I hope you know. Yes, I am worried about what the solution is going to be and like, oh no, Genevieve is sick. But like, the polycule is building, right? We are building towards a polycule and I'm so ready. And I know it's not going to happen, but I'm so ready for it. I'm unironically kind of invested in seeing Boris and Alec like have a confession to each other. Like, this is a romance author doing non-romance stuff. I might need to read some of his romance, like on stream. The mask of self-deception was no longer a mask for me. It was a part of me. Night lifted it, laying bare the stifled truth below, but there was no one to see except myself. And when day broke, the mask fell back on of its own accord. These thoughts passed through my troubled mind as I lay sick, but they were hopelessly entangled with visions of white creatures, heavy as snow, crawling around in Boris's basin. Of the wolf's head on the rug, foaming and snapping at Genevieve, who lay smiling beside it. I thought, too, of the king in yellow, wrapped in the fantastic colors of his tattered mantle, and that bitter cry of Casilda, "Not upon us, O king, not upon us!" Feverishly, I struggled to put it from me, but I saw the lake of Holly, thin and blank, without a ripple or wind to stir it, and I saw the towers of Carcosa behind the moon. Aldebaran, the Hyades, Alar, Hastur glided through the cloud rifts which fluttered and flapped as they passed like the scalloped tatters of the king in yellow. I thought Hastur was the king in yellow. Interesting. Among all these, one sane thought persisted. It never wavered, no matter what else was going on in my disordered mind, that my chief reason for existing was to meet some requirement of Boris and Genevieve. What this obligation was, its nature, was never clear. Sometimes it seemed to be protection, sometimes support through a great crisis. Whatever it seemed to be for the time, its weight rested only on me, and I was never so ill or weak that I did not respond with my whole soul. There were always crowds of faces about me, mostly strange, but a few I recognized, Boris among them. Afterward, they told me this could not have been, but I know that once, at least, he bent over me. It was only a touch, a faint echo of his voice. Then the clouds settled back on my senses, and I lost him. But he did stand there and bend over me once, at least. This is the most homosexual description. I'm sorry. This is, I am in love, or sorry, bisexual description, I should say. This is the most, I am in love, like soulmates with Boris and Genevieve. and I would do anything for them. There is like what this obligation was. Its nature was never clear. Sometimes it was protection, sometimes support through a great crisis. Whatever it seemed to be for the time, its weight rested only on me, and I was never so ill or weak that I did not respond with my soul. That is not something you say about your bestie. Like, maybe you do. Maybe you say that just about your friends. But that strikes me as very like romance coded. That strikes me as someone who is in love with these two people and wants to do anything for them. And no matter how weak or damaged or injured you are, you will always, with your entire being, strive to be the best person you can be for these people you care for. And like, obviously you can have that platonically. I think that it's very sweet and wholesome when you can do that platonically, but it's been so coded. I think straightest artist in the 1895, literally, like, I don't know anything about Chambers. I should probably look into him, like just who he was, what he was up to. But it would not surprise me if he was queer and was inserting that into his work. It would also not surprise me if this is literally just like a cultural difference. Because 130 years ago was a very different time, particularly with male-male friendships. There was a very different expectation and line of what you could do while still being considered straight, right? Until the gay panic of the 20th century, men would unironically like sleep in the same bed together, and no one would think that was weird. Because they're both men, and they're both obviously attracted to women, because all men are attracted to women. That's how it is. So obviously there were gay men at that time. There were bisexual men as well. But it could very easily just be a completely straight for the time that in retrospect with the modern perspective, because of modern cultural shifts, makes it feel queer. But at the same time, I'd believe you either way. Like if I looked into Chambers and it's like, oh yeah, he never married, or he had a romance with his childhood best friend, but it's rumored that it was purely a marriage of convenience and they didn't actually love each other. Like those are, if I read either of those, I would just assume this was meant to be gay. Two bros just sharing a bed, exactly. The only one bed trope, but no one's weird about it. They're just like, yeah, I don't care. You're my buddy. Like I've slept in the same bed as my friends before. Have you? Like, sometimes it's just economic, whether it's a sleepover or if you're going on a trip or something, like you just don't have the bed space to not sleep in the same bed. Nothing weird with that. Nothing weird with that. At last, one morning I awoke to find the sunlight falling across my bed and Jack Scott reading beside me. I had not the strength to speak aloud, neither could I think, much less remember, but I could smile feebly as Jack's eyes met mine. And when he jumped up and asked eagerly if I wanted anything, I could whisper, When he jumped up and asked eagerly if I wanted anything, I could whisper, "Yes, Boris." Jack moved to the head of my bed and leaned down to arrange my pillow. I did not see his face, but he answered heartily, "You must wait, Alec. You are too weak to see even Boris." My gay lover! I need to see him! I waited and grew strong. In a few days, I was able to see whom I would, but meanwhile, I had thought and remembered. From the moment when all the past grew clear again in my mind, I never doubted what I should do when the time came, and I felt sure that Boris would have resolved upon the same course so far as he was concerned. As for what pertained to me alone, I knew he would see that also, as did I. I no longer asked for anyone. I never inquired why no message came from them, why, during the week I lay there, waiting and growing stronger, I never heard their name spoken. Preoccupied with my own searchings for the right way, and with my feeble but determined fight against despair, I simply acquiesced in Jack's reticence, taking for granted that he was afraid to speak of them, lest I should turn unruly and insist on seeing them. Meanwhile, I said over and over to myself how it would be when life began again for us all. We would take up our relations exactly as they were before Genevieve fell ill. Boris and I would look into each other's eyes, and there would be neither rancor nor cowardice nor mistrust in that glance, only lust. I would be with them again for a little while in the dear intimacy of their home, and then, without pretext or explanation, I would disappear from their lives forever. Boris would know. Genevieve, the only comfort was that she would never know. It seemed, as I thought it over, that I had found the meaning of that sense of obligation which had persisted all through my delirium, and the only possible answer to it. So, when I was quite ready, I beckoned Jack to me one day and said, "Jack, I want Boris at once, and take my dearest greeting to Genevieve." When at last he made me understand that they were both dead. What? I fell into a wild rage that tore all of my convalescent strength to atoms. I raved and cursed myself into a relapse, from which I crawled forth some weeks afterward, a boy of 21 who believed that his youth was gone forever. I seemed to be past the capability of further suffering, and one day when Jack handed me a letter and the keys to Boris's house, I took them without a tremor and asked him to tell me all. It was cruel of me to ask him, but there was no help for it, and he leaned wearily on his thin hands to reopen the wound which could never entirely heal. He began very quietly, "Alec, unless you have a clue that I know nothing about, you will not be able to explain any more than I what has happened. I suspect that you would rather not hear these details, but you must learn them, else I would spare you the relation. God knows I wish I would be spared the telling. I shall use few words. It's gonna be that Boris put both himself and Genevieve in the solution. I get up to make a protein shake and they all died. Yeah, because you didn't give them protein fast enough. The day when I left you in the doctor's care and came back to Boris, I found him working on the fates. Genevieve, he said, was sleeping under the influence of drugs. She'd been quite out of her mind, he said. He kept on working, not talking anymore, and I watched him. Before long, I saw the third figure of the group, the one looking straight ahead out over the world, bore his face. Not as you ever saw it, but as it looked then and to the end. This is one thing for which I should like to find an explanation, but I never shall. Well, he worked and I watched him in silence, and we went on that way until nearly midnight. Then we heard the door open and shut sharply, and a swift rush in the next room. Boris sprang through the doorway and I followed, but we were too late. She lay at the bottom of the pool, her hands laid across her breast. Then Boris shot himself through the heart. She lay at the bottom of the pool, her hands across her breast. Then Boris shot himself through the heart. Jack stopped speaking. Drops of sweat stood under his eyes, and his thin cheeks twitched. I carried Boris to his room. Then I went back and let that hellish fluid out of the pool, and turning on all the water, washed the marble clean of every drop. When at length I dared descend the steps, I found her lying as white as snow. At last, when I decided what was best to do, I went into the laboratory, and first emptied the solution in the basin into the waste pipe. Then I poured the contents of every jar and bottle after it. There was a wood in the fireplace, so I built a fire, and breaking the locks of Boris's cabinet, I burnt every paper, notebook, and letter that I found there. With a mallet from the studio, I smashed the pieces of all the empty bottles. Then, loading them to the coal scuttle, I carried them to the cellar and threw them over the red-hot bed of the furnace. 6 times I made the journey, and at last, not a vestige remained of anything which might again aid in seeking for the formula which Boris had found. Then, at last, I dared call the doctor. He's a good man, and together we struggled to keep it from the public. Without him, I could have never succeeded. At last, we got the servants paid and sent away into the country, where old Rosier keeps them quiet with stories of Boris's and Genevieve's travels in a distant land, from whence they will not return for years. We buried Boris in the little cemetery of Sèvres. The doctor is a good creature. Okay, I guess we got Jack and Dr. pet play. The doctor is a good creature and knows when to pity a man who can bear no more. He gave his certificate of heart disease and asked no more questions of me. Oh, so medical malpractice. So he's not a good man. He's a malpracticing doctor that is falsifying medical certificates, death certificates. Then lifting his head from his hands, he said, "Open the letter, Alec. It is for us both." I tore it open. It was Boris's will dated a year before. He left everything to Genevieve, and in case of her dying childless, I was to take control of the house. They're a polycule. Alec's dead lovers left him their estate. He was right after the children of the childless Genevieve. Which, yes, that is something you would do with your best friend. However, it's also something you would do with a polycule. I was to take control of the house in the Rue Saint-Cécile. I keep wanting to say Rue Saint-Ghislaine because Disco Elysium. In the Rue Saint-Cécile. And Jack Scott, the management at Ept. They mentioned that earlier. I don't remember what that is. On our deaths, the property reverted to his mother's family in Russia, with the exception of the sculptured marbles executed by himself. These he left to me. The page blurred under our eyes, and Jack got up and walked to the window. Presently, he returned and sat down again. I dreaded to hear what he was going to say, but he spoke with the same simplicity and gentleness. Genevieve lies before the Madonna in the marble room. The Madonna bends tenderly above her, and Genevieve smiles back into that calm face that never would have been except for her. His face broke, and he grasped my hand, saying, "Courage, Alec." Next morning, he left for Ept to fulfill his trust. The same evening, I took the keys and went into the house I had known so well. Everything was in order, but the silence was terrible. Though I went twice to the door of the marble room, I could not force myself to enter. It was beyond my strength. I went into the smoking room and sat down before the spinet. A small lace handkerchief lay on the keys, and I turned away, choking. It was plain I could not stay, so I locked every door, every window, and the 3 front and back gates, and went away. Next morning, Alcide packed my valise, and leaving him in charge of my apartments, I took the Orient Express for Constantinople. During the 2 years that I'd wandered through the East at first in our letters, we never mentioned Genevieve and Boris, but gradually their names crept in. I recollect particularly a passage in one of Jack's letters replying to one of mine. What you tell me of seeing Boris bending over you while you lay ill and feeling his touch of your face and hearing his voice, of course, troubles me. This that you describe must have happened a fortnight after he died. I say to myself that you were dreaming, that it was part of your delirium, but the explanation does not satisfy me, nor would it you. Toward the end of the 2nd year, a letter came from Jack to me in India, so unlike anything that I've ever known of him that I decided to return at once to Paris, or Paris, since they're French. He wrote, "I am well and sell all my pictures as artists do, who have no need of money. I have not a care of my own, but I am more restless than if I had. I have no care of my own, but I am more restless than if I had. I am unable to shake off a strange anxiety about you. It is not apprehension, it is rather a breathless expectancy of God knows. I can only say it is wearing me out. Nights I dream always of you and Boris. I can never recall anything afterwards, but I wake in the morning with my heart beating, and all day the excitement increases until I fall asleep at night to recall the same experience. I am quite exhausted by it, and have determined to break up this morbid condition. I must see you. Shall I go to Bombay, or will you come to Paris?" Are we getting post major character death best friends to lovers? Like, are we getting Jack was crushing on Boris and Alec, while Alec was crushing on Boris and Genevieve was crushing on Alec and Boris was crushing on Genevieve and Alec. So we had Genevieve and Boris get together, but all 3 of them alongside Alec all wanted to be together, and Jack is on the outside and wanted to get with Alec and Boris, and now that they're both gone, Alec is just like, "I need to see you. Alec, I need to see you. Shall I go to Bombay, or will you come to Paris?" I telegraphed him to expect me by the next steamer. Like, I'm sorry. I'm really struggling to take this seriously, but I'm enjoying this a lot, I will say. When we met, I thought he had changed very little. He insisted, looked in splendid health. It was good to hear his voice again, and as we sat and chatted about what life still held for us, we felt that it was pleasant to be alive in the bright spring weather. We stayed in Paris a week together, and then I went for a week to Ept with him. But first of all, we went to the cemetery at Sèvres, where Boris lay. "Shall we place the Fates in that little grove above him?" Jack asked, and I answered, "I think only the Madonna should watch over Boris's grave." But Jack was none the better for my homecoming. The dreams of which he could not retain even the least definite outline continued, and he said that at times the sense of breathless expectancy was suffocating. "You see, I do you harm and not good," I said. Just like the freaking, truck outside? What is that? Oh yeah, that's like an 18... Wait. Oh, it's a dump truck. My apologies. What do you mean, not that kind of steamer? I think it's like a boat steamer, no? I wasn't saying anything lewd. How dare you? You see, I do you harm and not good, I said. Try a change without me. So he started alone for a ramble among the Channel Islands, and I went back to Paris. I'd not entered Boris's house, now mine since my return, but I knew it must be done. It had been kept in order by Jack. There were servants there, so I gave up my own apartment and went to live there. Instead of the agitation I had feared, I found myself able to paint there tranquilly. I visited all the rooms, all but one. I could not bring myself to enter the marble room where Genevieve lay, and yet I felt the longing growing. Sorry. I could not bring myself to enter the marble room where Genevieve lay, and yet I felt the longing growing daily to look upon her face, to kneel beside her. One April afternoon, I lay dreaming in the smoking room, just as I had lain 2 years before, and mechanically, I looked among the tawny eastern rugs for the wolfskin. At last, I distinguished the pointed ears and flat, cruel head, and I thought of my dream, where I saw Genevieve laying beside it. The helmets still hung among the threadbare tapestry, among them old Spanish morion, which I remembered Genevieve had once put on when we were amusing ourselves with the ancient bits of mail. I turned my eyes to the spinet. Every yellow key seemed elongated of her caressing hand, and I rose, drawn by the strength of my life's passion, to the sealed door of the marble room. The heavy doors swung inward under my trembling hand. Sunlight poured through the window, tipping with gold the wings of Cupid, and lingered like a nimbus over the brows of the Madonna. Her tender face bent in compassion over a marble form, so exquisitely pure that I knelt and sighed to myself. Genevieve lay in the shadow under the Madonna, and yet, through her white arms, I saw the pale azure vein, and beneath her softly clasped hands, the fold of her dress were tinged with rose, as if from some faint warm light within her breast. Bending with a breaking heart, I touched the marble drapery with my lips, then crept back into the silent house. A maid came and brought me a letter, and I sat down in the little conservatory to read it. But as I was about to break the seal, seeing the girl lingering, I asked her what she wanted. She stammered something about a white rabbit that had been caught in the house, and asked what should be done with it. I told her to let it loose in the walled garden behind the house and open my letter. It was from Jack, but so incoherent that I thought he must have lost his reason. It was nothing but a series of prayers to me to not leave the house until he could get back. He could not tell me why. There were the dreams, he said. He could explain nothing. But he said he was sure that I must not leave the house in Rue Sainte-Cécile. As I finished reading and raised my eyes and saw the same maidservant standing in the doorway holding a glass dish in which 2 goldfish were swimming, "Put them in the tank and tell me what you mean by interrupting me." With a half-suppressed whimper, she emptied water and fish into the aquarium at the end of the conservatory, and turning to me, asked my permission to leave my service. Oh, the white rabbit and the fish were the ones that were statues, so Genevieve is going to come back? Or dead? With a half-suppressed whimper, she emptied water and fish into an aquarium at the end of the conservatory, and turned to me, asking my permission to leave my service. She said people were playing tricks on her, evidently with the design of getting her in trouble. The marble rabbit had been stolen, and a live one had been brought into the house. The 2 marble fish were gone, and she had just found these common live things flopping on the dining room floor. I reassured her and sent her away, saying I would look about myself. I went into the studio. There was nothing there but my canvases and some casts, except the marble of the Easter lily. I saw it on the table across the room. Then I strode angrily over to it, but the flower I lifted from the table was fresh and fragile and filled the air with perfume. Then, suddenly, I comprehended and sprang through the hall wall to the marble room. The door flew open, the sunlight streamed into my face, and through it, in a heavenly glory, the Madonna smiled, as Genevieve lifted her flushed face from her marble couch and opened her sleepy eyes. Wait! Why is that halfway wholesome? Also, hey, Olympus, the lovelorn lost. So, it was doomed yaoi. It was doomed yaoi polycule. Yeah, the substance is temporary. But apparently the substance was 2 years. So I'm not going to say it's like not that bad, but Boris, you could have had 2 years of where you thought your wife who loves your boyfriend more than you could have had 2 years with your boyfriend. You could have had nonstop action. And then when she came back, you could have gone back to being a throuple. Jack could have joined in and made it a quattrel? What's 4 people? I know if it's a 3-person polycule with a throuple, is there a 4-person polycule name? Alas, poor Boris. I knew you. I knew him, Horatio. All right. Apparently the Court and the Dragon, super short. So I can probably get through this in like half an hour. So I'm just going to hop on story 2 as well. A quatrain? Isn't quatrain a musical term? So, I gotta say, out of the two I've read thus far, I really enjoyed The Mask. I'm not like unironically, just the Repairer of Reputations I enjoyed, like I said, from like that kind of like meta storytelling perspective, and with the understanding it is a story from 1895, so I kind of had to suspend my disbelief a little bit. I kind of had to push past a couple 1895-isms, just in the kind of delivery of where it was. The Mask felt like it could have been written in the last 50 years. The Mask felt much more modern in just how it was written and how the characters interacted. And maybe that's because I'm a character reader. I'm a character like consumer. I love stories that are character oriented, whereas Repair of Reputations was more theme oriented. And there's nothing wrong with it being theme oriented, but I just connect with a story better if it's more about characters. And this one was all about like Alec and Boris and Genevieve and even Jack. I was not expecting Jack. Like when they name dropped Jack a couple times, I was like, okay, he's just a supporting character. And then he actually became like a recurring secondary character, which I was invested in the polycule. The funniest thing is I saw a completely unrelated YouTuber, Johnny Razor, talk about The King in Yellow and how one of its best interpretations is in Minecraft. How? The Repair of Reputations is a very world-buildy, while The Mask is great writing. No, literally, I think one person said, like, if you're gonna read only a couple of them, make sure you read the Mask, and I think it was one of the Streets. It was, make sure you read The Mask, and it might have been Street of Our Lady of the Fields. Like, those were considered, like, two of the best ones, right? Yeah, Jack just pulled the whole destroy the unnatural evil on top off the top rope out of somewhere. Like, genuinely, reading The Mask, I would recommend The Mask to people who don't want to read like older literature. I would say like, hey, this is just a fun little read. I would highly recommend it. And I'll probably make a short of my journey just freaking out over it being yaoi, because I think it's really funny. But in the Court of the Dragon, this is a short one, so I can get through this one. O thou who burn'st in heart for those who burn in hell, those fires thyself shall feed in turn. How long be crying mercy on them, God? Why, who art thou to teach and he to learn? No source. I assume this is from The King in Yellow, but what act is it from? What scene is it from? Is it related to Casilda? Hydra gonna love this VOD for the yaoi, of course. In the church of St. Barnaby's, vespers were over. The clergy left the altar. The little choir boys flocked across the chancel and settled in the stalls. A Suisse in rich uniform marched down the south aisle, sounding his staff at every fourth step of the stone pavement. Behind him came the eloquent preacher and good man, Monseigneur C. C. That's not a hyphen, that's a series of hyphens, so that sounds like a censorship thing. My chair was nearing the chancel rail. I now turned towards the west end of the church. The other people between the altar and the pulpit turned too. There was a little scraping and rustling while the congregation seated itself again. The preacher mounted the pulpit stairs and the organ voluntarily ceased. I'd always found the organ playing at St. Barnaby's highly interesting. Learned and scientific it was, too much so for my small knowledge, but expressing a vivid, if cold intelligence. Moreover, it possessed the French quality of taste. Taste reigned supreme, self-controlled, dignified, reticent. Ah, so not French at all. Today, however, from the first chord, I had felt a change for the worst, a sinister change. During Vespers, it had been chiefly the chancel organ which supported the beautiful choir, but now and again, quite wantonly as it seemed, from the west gallery where the great organ stands, a heavy hand had struck across the church at the serene peace of those clear voices. It was something more than harsh and dissonant, and it betrayed no lack of skill. As it recurred again and again, it set me thinking of what my architect's books say about the custom in early times to consecrate the choir as soon as it was built, and that the nave, being finished sometimes half a century later, often did not get any blessing at all. I wondered idly if that had been the case of St. Barnaby's, and whether something not usually supported to be at home in a Christian church might have entered undetected or taken possession of the West Gallery. I had read of such things happening too, but not in works of architecture. Is that true? Does anyone know if that's true? Because that's actually really interesting. Because obviously old school architecture, if you have like a cathedral that's built, usually it will take dozens of years. It will start with a lead architect that has a team building it, and then later on, like 2 generations later, they will finish building it because they didn't have modern tools. So they had to do everything by hand and by wheelbarrow and by chisel, and you had many different people over time to contribute to these great works. And obviously, like, you might have a church that gets built in 10 years, right? You may have a church or a chapel or a temple or a mosque that gets built in 10 years, or shrine that gets built in 5 years. Like, you might have smaller projects that are built much faster, but larger cathedrals, larger churches, larger, more representative architectural works took generations. So I believe that. And like Sam says, that's true, but it's just wild to me that, like, I want to take that for a D&D game now, right? I want to run a D&D game where you're working for like a priest at a church, classic, like, oh, can you go to the graveyard and like take out these skeletons or whatever? You work with this NPC for level 1, level 2, and then like by level 3, the priest informs you that there's something going on at the church, and you find out that one of the sections of the church, what was it? The nave? Like, the nave of the church was never consecrated. So a demon has taken up residence there and is like corrupting people. And no one thinks it can set its foot on holy ground because it can't. But the nave isn't holy ground. So there is a fiend haunting this church, or a ghost haunting this church that the players have to deal with. And they're just like, what? The largest cathedral in the Americas still isn't finished? That does not surprise me. That does not surprise me. A lot of the delay was not having the funds to... Yeah, that's fair. But a building where your grandfather worked on it and you work on it too is pretty neat. And honestly, a lot of times it would be like, Coyd, you're a laborer. You spend 15 years working on this, and then, I don't know, you throw out your back, and then you retire and move to something else. And then your son, Sam, or your child, Sam, starts working on it. And then they work on it for like 30 years. And then Sam gets their child's or their sibling's child, Wumpus, to work on it with you. So you have like multiple strings of like the same family working on it. And I might be the lead architect at the start, but after 5-10 years, I might shift to a different project. So you're working on this, you know this project more than the new architect that comes in because you've been working on it longer. It's so cool. Then I remembered that St. Barnaby's was not much more than 100 years old, and smiled at the incongruous association with medieval superstitions with that cheerful little piece of 18th century rococo. But now Vespers were over, and there should have followed a few quiet chords, fit to accompany meditation while we waited for the sermon. Instead of that, the discord at the lower end of the church broke out with the departure of the clergy, as if now nothing could control it. I belong to those children of an older and simpler generation, who do not love to seek for psychological subtleties in art, and I have ever refused to find in music anything more than melody or harmony. But I felt that in the labyrinth of sounds now issued from that instrument, there was something being hunted. Up and down the pedals chased him, and while the manuals blared approval, poor devil, whoever he was, there seemed small hope of escape. My nervous annoyance changed to anger. Who's doing this? How dare he play like that in the midst of divine service? I glanced at the people near me. No one appeared at the least bit disturbed. The placid brows of the kneeling nuns, still turned towards the altar, lost none of their devout abstraction under the pale shadow of their white headdresses. The fashionable lady beside me was looking expectantly at Monseigneur C? I don't know. For all her face betrayed, the organ might have been singing an Ave Maria. But now at least the preacher had made the sign of the cross and commanded silence. I turned to him gladly. Thus far I had not found the rest I had counted on when I entered St. Barnaby that afternoon. I was worn out by 3 nights of physical suffering and mental trouble. The last had been the worst, and it was an exhausted body, a mind benumbed and yet acutely sensitive, which I had brought me to my favorite church for healing. For I had been reading The King in Yellow. Listen, in Repair of Reputations, it's made very clear The King in Yellow was outlawed despite the fact, like, even the most radical of free speech supporters thought it should be censored. I'm starting to understand why. Literally everyone who I have encountered that has read this has had major psychological issues. It's like Cannibal Holocaust, if you know what that is, right? Like the story, the movie. It was a movie from the early 20th century that was very, very messed up. Because they tried. It was the 20th century. They didn't have CGI, and they were just like, "Hey, let's actually put our actors and the crew in danger. Let's actually go out and do these horrible things." Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. And apparently, it's like one of the most disgusting films you've ever seen because a lot of it was real, and a lot of it had actual literal danger behind it. The sun ariseth; they gather themselves together and lay down in their dens. Monseigneur C delivered his text in a calm tone, glancing quietly over the congregation. My eyes turned, I knew not why, toward the lower end of the church. The organist was coming from behind his pipes and passing along the gallery on his way out. I saw him disappear by a small door that leads to some stairs which descend directly to the street. He was a slender man, and his face was as white as his coat was black. Good riddance, I thought. With your wicked music, I hope your assistant will be playing the closing voluntary. With a feeling of relief, with a deep, calm feeling of relief, I turned back to the mild face in the pulpit and settled myself to listen. Here at last was the ease of mind I longed for. "My children," said the preacher, "one truth the human soul finds hardest of all to learn is that it has nothing to fear. It can never be made to see that nothing can really harm it." Curious doctrine, I thought, for a Catholic priest. Let us see how he will reconcile that with the fathers. "Nothing can really harm the soul," he went on, in his coolest, clearest tones, "because..." But I never heard the rest. My eye left his face, I knew not for what reason, and sought the lower end of the church. The same man was coming out from behind the organ, and was passing along the gallery the same way. But there had not been time for him to return, and if he had returned, I must have seen him. I felt a faint chill, and my heart sank, and yet his going and coming were no affair of mine. I looked at him. I could not look away from his black figure and his white face. When he was exactly opposite to me, he turned and sat across the church, straight into my eyes, and a look of hate, intense and deadly. I've never seen any other like it. Would to God I might never see it again. Then he disappeared by the same door through which I watched him depart less than 60 seconds before. I sat and tried to collect my thoughts. My first sensation was like that of a very young child, very badly hurt, when it catches its breath before crying out. To find myself suddenly the object of such hatred was exquisitely painful, and this man was an utter stranger. Why should he hate me so? Me, whom he had never seen before? For the moment, all other sensation was merged into this one pang. Even fear was subordinate to grief, and for the moment, I never doubted. And in the next, I began to reason, and a sense of the incongruous came to my aid. As I've said, St. Barnaby is a modern church. It is a small and well-lighted. One sees all over it, almost at a glance. The organ gallery gets a strong white light from a row of long windows in the clerestory, which have not even colored glass. The pulpit being in the middle of the church, it followed that. When I turned towards it, whatever moved at the west end could not fail to attract my eye. When the organist passed, it was no wonder that I saw him. I had simply miscalculated the interval between his first and second passing. He had come in that last time by the other side door, and for the look which had so upset me, there had been no such thing, and I was a nervous fool. I looked about. There was a likely place to harbor supernatural hosts. That clear-cut, reasonable face of Monseigneur C, his collected manner and easy, graceful gestures, were they not just a little discouraging to the notion of gruesome mystery? I glanced above his head and almost laughed. That flyaway lady supporting one corner of the pulpit canopy, which looked like a fringed damask tablecloth in a high wind. At the first attempt of a basilisk to pose up there in the organ loft, she would point her gold trumpet at him and puff him out of existence. I laughed to myself over this conceit, which, at the time, I thought very amusing, and sat and chafed myself and everyone else, from the old harpy outside the railing who had made me pay 10 centimes for my chair before she would let me in. She was more like a basilisk, I told myself, than was my organist with the anemic complexion. I'm sorry. What a read. What a read, I gotta say. She was more like a basilisk, I told myself, than was my organist with the anemic complexion. That's like taking a shot at her, taking a shot at him, like with a ricochet. I'm actually kind of digging Chambers' writing style. From that grim old dame to, yes, alas, to Monseigneur C himself. For all devoutness had fled, I had never yet done such a thing in my life, but now I felt a desire to mock. As for the sermon, I could not hear a word of it, for the jingle in my ears of, "The skirts of St. Paul has reached, having preached us those 6 Lent lectures, more unctuous than ever he preached," keeping time to the most fantastic and irreverent thoughts. It was no use to sit there any longer. I must get out the doors and shake myself free of this hateful mood. I knew the rudeness I was committing, but still, I rose and left the church. A spring sun was shining on Rue Saint-Honoré, and as I ran down the church steps, on one corner stood a barrow full of yellow jonquils, pale violets from the Riviera, dark Russian violets, and white Roman hyacinths in a golden cloud of mimosa. The street was full of Sunday pleasure seekers. I swung my cane and laughed with the rest. Someone overtook and passed me. He never turned, but there was the same deadly malignity in his white profile that there had been in his eyes. I watched him as long as I could. His lithe back expressed the same menace. Every step that carried him away from me seemed to bear him on some errand connected with my destruction. I was creeping along, my feet almost refusing to move. There began to dawn on me a sense of responsibility for something long forgotten. It began to seem as if I deserved that which he threatened. It reached a long way back, a long, long way back. It had lain dormant all these years. It was there, though, and presently it would rise and confront me. But I would try to escape as I stumbled as best I could into the Rue de Rivoli. I'm sorry, I saw that and I thought it was Rue de Ravioli. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize we were Italian. I thought we were French. And I stumbled the best I could to the Rue de Rivoli, across the Place de la Concorde, and onto the quai. I looked with sick eyes upon the sun, to the sun, shining through the white foam of the fountain, pouring over the backs of the dusty bronze river gods, on the faraway arc, a structure of amethyst mist, on the countless vistas of gray stems and bare branches faintly green. Then I saw him again, coming down one of the chestnut alleys of the Cour la Reine. I left the riverside, plunged blindly across the Champ. This is an aggressively French story, I will say. The Repair of Reputations had a little bit of that, but I assume Chambers is French. I actually didn't know that. Someone may have mentioned that before, but I'm surprised. I left the riverside, plunged blindly across the Champs-Élysées, and turned towards the Arc. The setting sun was sending its rays along the green sward of Ronde Point. In the full glow, he sat on a bench, children and young mothers all around him. He was nothing but a Sunday lounger, like the others, like myself. I said the words almost aloud, and all the while I gazed at the malignant hatred on his face, but he was not looking at me. I crept past and dragged my leaden feet up the avenue. I knew that every time I met him brought him nearer to the accomplishment of his purpose and fate, and still, I tried to save myself. The last rays of sunset were pouring through the great arc. I passed under it and met him face to face. I had left him far down the Champs-Élysées, and yet he came in with a stream of people who were returning to the Bois de Boulogne. Boulogne? Bouillon? The Bois de Boulogne. No, not Bouillon is like 2 L's. Bois de Boulogne? To the Bois de Boulogne. He came so close that he brushed me. His slender frame felt like iron inside its loose black covering. He showed no signs of haste, nor of fatigue, nor of any human feeling. His whole being expressed but one thing, the will and the power to work me evil. In anguish I watched him when he went down the broad, crowded avenue that was all flashing with wheels and the trappings of horses and the helmets of the Garde Républicaine. He was soon lost to sight. Then I turned and fled, into the bois and far out beyond it. I know not where I went, but after a long while it seemed to me night had fallen, and I found myself sitting at a table before a small cafe. I had wandered back into the bois. It was hours now since I had seen him. Physical fatigue and mental suffering had left me no more power to think or feel. I was tired, so tired. I longed to hide away in my own den. I resolved to go home, but that was a long way off. I live in the Court of the Dragon, a narrow passage that leads from the Rue de Renée to the Rue du Dragon. It is an impasse, traversable only for foot passengers. Over the entrance of the Rue de Renée is a balcony supported by an iron dragon. Within the court, tall old houses rise on either side, and close to the ends that gives on the two streets, huge gates swung back during the day into the walls of the deep archways close this court after midnight, and one must enter then by ringing at certain small doors on the side. The sunken pavement collects unsavory pools, steep stairways pitch down to the doors that open on the court. The ground floors are occupied by shops of second-hand dealers and by ironworkers. All day long, the place rings with the clink of hammers and the clang of metal bars. Unsavory as it is below, there's a cheerfulness and comfort and hard, honest work above. 5 flights up are the ateliers of architects and painters, and the hiding places of middle-aged students like myself who want to live alone. When I first came here to live, I was young and not alone. I had to walk away before any conveyance appeared, but at last, when I'd almost reached the Arc de Triomphe again, an empty cab came along and I took it. From the Arc to the Rue de Renée is a drive of more than half an hour, especially when one is conveyed by a tired cab horse that has been at the mercy of Sunday fete makers. There have been times before I passed down the dragon's wings to meet my enemy over and over again, but I never saw him once, and now refuge was close at hand. Before the wide gateway, a small mob of children were playing. Our concierge and his wife walked about among them with their black poodle, keeping order. Some couples were waltzing on the sidewalk. I returned their greetings and hurried in. All the inhabitants of the court had trooped out into the street. The place was quite deserted, lighted by a few lanterns hung up high in which the gas burned dimly. My apartment was at the top of a house, halfway down the road, reached by a staircase that descended almost into the street, with only a bit of passageway intervening. I set my foot on the threshold of the open door. The friendly old ruinous stairs rose before me, and leading up to rest and shelter. Looking back over my right shoulder, I saw him, 10 paces off. He must have entered the court with me. He was coming straight on, neither slowly nor swiftly, but straight on to me. And now, he was looking at me. For the first time since our eyes encountered across the church, they met now again, and I knew that the time had come. Retreating backwards, down the court, I faced him. I meant to escape by the entrance of the Rue de Dragon. His eyes told me that I should never escape. It seemed ages while we were going, I retreating, he advancing down the court in perfect silence, but at last, I felt the shadow of the archway, and the next step brought me within it. I had meant to turn here and spring through into the street, but the shadow was not that of the archway. It was that of a vault. The great doors on the Rue de Dragon were closed. I felt this by the blackness which surrounded me, and at the same instant, I read it in his face. How his face gleamed in the darkness, drawing swiftly nearer. The deep vault, the huge closed doors, their cold iron clamps were all on his side. The thing which he had threatened had arrived. It gathered and bore down on me from the fathomless shadows. The point from which it would strike was his infernal eyes. Hopeless, I set my back against the barred door and defied him. There was a scraping of chairs on the stone floor, and a rustling as the congregation rose. I could hear the Suisse's staff in the south aisle preceding Monseigneur's C to the sacristy. The kneeling nuns, roused from their devout abstraction, made their reverence and went away. The fashionable lady, my neighbor, rose also with graceful reserve, and she departed. Her glance just flitted over my face in disapproval. Half dead, or so it seemed to me, yet intensely alive to every trifle, I sat among the leisurely moving crowd, and then rose too and went to the door. I had slept through the sermon. Had I slept through the sermon? I looked up and saw him passing through the gallery to his place. Only his side I saw. The thin bent arm in his black covering looked like one of the devilish nameless instruments which lie in the disused torture chamber of medieval castles. But I'd escaped him, though his eyes had said I should not. Had I escaped him? That which gave him the power over me came back out of oblivion, where I had hoped to keep it. For I knew him now. Death and the awful abode of lost souls, whither my weakness long ago had sent him. They'd changed him for every other eye but not for mine. I had recognized him almost from the first. I had never doubted. what he was come to do. And now I knew that while my body sat safe in the cheerful little church, he had been hunting my soul in the court of dragon. I crept to the door. The organ broke out overhead with a blare. A dazzling light filled the church, blotting the altar from my eyes. The people faded away. The arches of the vaulted roof vanished. I raised my seared eyes to the fathomless glare, and I saw the black stars hanging in the heavens, and the wet winds from the lake of Hali chilled my face. And now, far away, over leagues of tossing cloud waves, I saw the moon dripping with spray, and beyond, the towers of Carcosa rose behind the moon. Death and the awful abode of lost souls, whither my weakness long ago had sent him, and changed him for every eye but mine. And now I heard his voice, rising, swelling, thundering through the flaring lights, and as I fell, the radiance increasing, poured over me in waves of flame. Then I sank into the depths, and I heard the king in yellow whispering into my soul, "It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God." I like that one significantly less. I'm not gonna lie. This one, I don't really get it. So, like, obviously I understand the main character in church sees who's presumably the king in yellow, a supernatural entity tied to the king in yellow, pursuing him. He spends all day just kind of running in circles, then goes home, then gets caught. Then it's revealed that he actually just fell asleep. Then it's revealed that he wasn't asleep, it was his soul that was being pursued. Then it's revealed that he was asleep, and independent of that, his soul was being pursued. And then it's revealed that the king in yellow was the pale-faced guy? Huh. Yeah, I was much less a fan of that one. I ain't gonna lie, I ain't gonna front. But I didn't dislike it, I will say. Like, so far, Mask number 1, then Repair of Reputations, then Court of the Dragon. Yellow Sign is another 40-page one. So that would be... yeah, it's a 40-page one, and then Demoiselle D. I think that those two will be next time, because that one is a 40-page one and a 20-page one. This one was 14 pages, was 15 pages right now. That took me like 20, 30 minutes. Whereas the Mask, which was like 30 pages, took me like an hour, right? Repair of Reputations took me like an hour and a half. So again, I'm enjoying this significantly more than I thought I would. I did not know much about the King in Yellow going into it. There was no sign of the Fates in the Court of the Dragon. So I don't think the Fates is a running theme. I think the Fates just happened to show up in Repair of Reputations at the Mask. But obviously the King in Yellow shows up in every story. Every character interfaces with it differently, and every character has a different reaction to it. It seems as though, broadly speaking, you get sick and mentally unwell with the King in Yellow. But as the Court of Dragon is showing, he read it, and now he's basically like, his soul is claimed by Carcosa. He is being pursued by the King in Yellow, who wants to bring him to Carcosa. Whereas in the Repair of Reputations, the main character thought himself the rightful prince of Carcosa. And then the second one, he read the King in Yellow and just got sick, right? Yeah, arrow tangents are enjoyable, but do limit the speed. And that's why I don't stop myself from tangenting. But I definitely, like, the reason I did Court of the Dragon so quickly is because I didn't go on tangents. I went on like a couple tangents in the very beginning, but broadly speaking, I just kind of like went through it. And I think when I do that, it also helps my reading. It makes it more flow, because when I don't just continuously read, if I stop because I'm tangenting, I lose my ability to just kind of like get into the zone. But once I just start and I just keep going, I tend to read not just faster, but also more clearly. I feel like I made fewer mistakes. What's the deal with Monseigneur? Like, C dash dash dash. Like, I'm assuming Carcosa, and it's censored. But that's such a weird choice. It does hurt my Dracula flow, yeah. And I didn't watch Dracula flow for Halloween. I wanted to, but I forgot. Either way, thank you all so much, whether you were here in the live chat or you are here watching the VOD. I try to keep these weekly member streams pretty short, like under 2 hours, because I'm just reading. I don't want to read all day. I just want to read a little bit, kind of give you something special if you're in the members so that you can chat properly in the stream. But afterwards, it goes public, so you can watch this all you want. I liked the mask. I was told I was going to like the mask, and I really did enjoy the mask. It is the Court of the Dragon that I'm less thrilled on. But I didn't dislike it. I don't regret reading this. And I'm excited to continue reading, because if the mask is the best this has to offer, and I don't know if the Court of the Dragon is the worst it has to offer, but like, if all of them are on the level of like the Repair of Reputations of the Court of the Dragon, I will walk away from this happy I did it, because on average, it was about what I expected and about what I would have fun with. If it's closer to the mask, and the mask is just the best of the best, then I will walk away from this like wanting to read more of his work. Like, unironically, I think it would be really funny, because Chambers, copyright 1895, if it's before 1930, I can just read it because it's public domain. I could just read more of Chambers' romance on stream if we really want. Hopefully it inspires the mech in yellow. No, we don't need the mech in yellow. And like, that would be SSC, because SSC is 1, yellow, but 2, it's like designer, it's fancy, it has flesh. And I feel like that's very Cthulhu coded. But obviously Horus is super eldritch. So Horus strikes me as more Lovecraft, whereas SSC can rock the king in yellow a bit. Either way, thank you all so much for being here. I think it was censorship, yeah, that, or just not wanting to give a last name. See, when I say censorship, I mean in-universe censorship. I am assuming this was the author's intent, was to say, Monseigneur C. And then it's censored for a reason to the point of advancing the narrative of the Court of the Dragon. I don't know that, though. But either way, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you listening to the VOD. Let me know what you thought of the stories, and if I have anything to look forward with the next ones. Enjoy your day, enjoy your night, and enjoy your time in the solution. You are being sent to the drawer. Please do not resist. Okay.